The morning sun crept slowly over the horizon, spilling its first pale rays across the vast stretch of green farmland. James stood near the edge of the field, his boots half buried in the damp soil, the scent of earth and young corn filling the air. For a long moment, he said nothing, just listened. The sound of rustling leaves, the faint chirp of distant birds, the hum of life awakening. This was his kingdom, not of marble walls and shining towers, but of wind, sweat, and patience. The truck pulled up a moment later, carrying several sacks of dried maize. The driver, a cheerful man named Tuan, waved from the cabin. "Morning, boss. The samples from yesterday's harvest, perfect quality." James smiled faintly. "Good. We'll keep working with that farm. They've improved a lot this season." He flipped through the documents, his eyes sharp and focused. "Let's make it official." Within minutes, the contract was signed. Another steady partnership secured. Later, at the local market, James stopped by a small seed stall. "Raumon, lettuce, and some spinach seeds," he said, studying the packets carefully. The old vendor grinned. "Starting a new garden, young man?" James nodded. "A bigger one this time. The land's rich here. It deserves to grow more than just profit." The man chuckled. "You sound like someone who loves the soil." James paused, his gaze distant. "I do. It's the only thing that never lies to me." When he returned to the office, a woman was waiting at the entrance. Dressed neatly in light colors, her posture confident yet polite. "Mr. James?" she asked. "I'm Lynn. Your father sent me. He said you might need an extra hand managing operations." James tilted his head slightly, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "My father did, huh? I didn't realize he still had a say in my business." Lynn smiled. "He worries, that's all. He said you work too much and trust too few." James laughed softly, shaking his head. "He's not wrong about the second part." He gestured toward the large wooden building nearby. "Come, I'll show you around." The company's timber warehouse stood like a cathedral of craftsmanship, rows of polished planks stacked neatly, the smell of cedar and oak rich in the air. Lynn's eyes widened as James guided her through the aisles. "Every piece here is marked with a code," he explained. "We trace its source, check humidity, grade, and color. Nothing leaves here without my signature." Lynn nodded, impressed. "It's meticulous." "It has to be," he replied. "Quality doesn't forgive shortcuts." They walked to the back of the warehouse, where sunlight poured through the open shutters, illuminating tiny motes of dust dancing in the air. Lynn looked at him thoughtfully. "Your father told me you started this farm from nothing." James smiled faintly. "From debt and stubbornness, actually. And now you're one of the largest exporters in the region." He shrugged. "Success is just another crop. You have to plant it, water it, and protect it from pests." The next day, news spread through the workers that an unexpected visitor had arrived. James was checking invoices when a familiar voice echoed behind him. "James!" The sound froze him. He turned slowly. There she was, Diep, the woman who once held his heart and then shattered it. Her eyes were softer now, shadowed by exhaustion and something deeper, regret. "You weren't answering my messages," she said quietly. "So I came." James took a slow breath. "You shouldn't have. I just wanted to talk." "About what?" His tone was calm, but his chest felt tight. "About the past or the mess you made of it?" Diep lowered her gaze. "I know I hurt you. I was foolish. I thought I could build a life with someone else, someone who promised the world. But he left me with nothing, not even dignity." Her voice cracked. "I'm not here to ask for pity. I just needed to see you once more." For a long moment, James said nothing. He wanted to stay angry. He wanted to tell her to leave, but the sight of her, tired, fragile, standing in the place she once helped him dream about, tore at his resolve. "Why now?" he asked softly. "Because I have no one else," she whispered. That evening, the sky turned red with the dying light. Lynn found James sitting by the veranda, a half-empty cup of coffee cooling beside him. "She's staying in town," Lynn said gently. "I saw her at the guest house." James nodded slowly. "I know." "Are you all right?" He gave a faint smile. "I thought I was, until I saw her again." The next morning, as if fate couldn't resist twisting the knife, chaos struck. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, reeking of cheap liquor, arrived at the market where Diep was selling vegetables. He cornered her, his voice low and threatening. "You think you can just walk away from me after everything I did for you?" Diep's hands trembled. "Please, not here." He grabbed her wrist. "I said you're coming with me." Before anyone could react, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Let her go." The crowd parted as James stepped forward, his face unreadable. The man sneered. "And who are you, her new savior?" "No," James replied, his voice cold as steel. "Just someone who doesn't tolerate cowards." The man lunged, but James moved faster, blocking his strike and forcing him back. "Walk away," James warned. The man hesitated, then spat on the ground and stormed off, muttering curses. Diep's knees buckled, but James caught her before she fell. "You shouldn't have come here alone," he said softly. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "I had nowhere else to go." He looked at her for a long time, then sighed. "Come, you'll stay at the farm tonight." That evening, rain began to fall, slow at first, then heavy, drumming against the wooden roof. Inside the small kitchen, James lit a fire while Diep dried her hair near the stove. The air smelled of smoke and rain. "You haven't changed," she said after a while. "Still the same James who works too much and talks too little." He smiled faintly. "And you're still the same Diep who hides pain behind a brave face." They ate in silence for a while, the warmth of the food softening the space between them. When she finally looked up, her eyes glistened. "I never stopped thinking about you," she whispered, "even when I tried to." James set down his spoon slowly. "You broke me once, Diep. I built everything I have now to forget you." "I know," she said, tears falling freely now, "and that's why I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I still had to tell you the truth." He looked away, toward the window where the rain streaked down in endless rivers. For a long time, there was only silence. Then, quietly, he said, "Maybe forgiveness isn't something you deserve. Maybe it's something we both need." Diep reached across the table, hesitating before her fingers brushed his hand. "Then let me try again. Not as the woman who left you, but as the one who learned what love really means." Outside, the rain began to ease, the night calm returning. James didn't move, didn't pull away. His heart, hardened by time and betrayal, softened with the sound of her voice. "Tomorrow," he said finally, "we'll see where tomorrow takes us." And for the first time in years, both of them allowed themselves to hope. The next morning broke with a gentle warmth that lingered on the wet leaves. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean. The sky stretched wide and pale, the scent of earth rich and alive. James stood outside the farmhouse, his shirt sleeves rolled up, the faint trace of fatigue under his eyes. He hadn't slept much. The memory of Diep's voice, fragile yet determined, echoed through him all night. He had told himself that love was a field long abandoned, one that no longer bore fruit. Yet here she was again, like the first green sprout after a long drought. Inside, Diep moved quietly around the small kitchen, her hair tied back, her movements deliberate. She prepared breakfast with the same gentle care she used to have years ago, when they were younger, when the world felt simpler. The aroma of fried eggs and rice filled the room. James entered silently, leaning against the doorway, watching her. For a moment, she didn't notice him. When she finally turned, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. "You still cook like that," he murmured. "Like you're healing something." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." They ate in near silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was the silence of people rebuilding the bridge between them. When Diep finished, she said softly, "I want to help on the farm today. I need to do something useful." James hesitated. "You don't have to. I want to," she insisted. He nodded. "All right then. But stay close." The day stretched long and full. Together they worked in the fields, side by side. Diep helped plant the new seeds, while James repaired the wooden fences damaged by the rain. The earth clung to their hands, their clothes, their souls. Every so often, he caught her smiling, sunlight catching in her hair, and it felt as though time had folded, bringing him back to the days when love was new and uncomplicated. At noon, Lynn arrived, bringing supplies from town. Her car came to a halt by the barn, and she stepped out, waving. "Boss, I brought the fertilizer you wanted, and coffee." Her voice froze slightly when she saw Diep walking out from behind the shed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh," Lynn said quietly. "I didn't know you had company." James gave a short nod. "An old friend." Lynn's expression softened, though her eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Well," she said, handing him the clipboard, "the timber contracts are ready for your signature. The buyers from Bangkok confirmed delivery next week." "Good," James replied, signing briskly. "You've done well." Lynn smiled. "Thank you. That's what your father sent me for, to make sure you don't drown in paperwork." As Lynn drove away, Diep looked at James. "She seems close to you." "She's good at her job," he said simply. "That's all." Diep gave a small nod, though her expression betrayed a hint of unease. "I see." By afternoon, the sky turned golden. They worked together, fixing the irrigation lines near the pond. Diep's laughter rang out as she accidentally splashed James with a handful of water. "Hey!" he exclaimed, half surprised, half amused. "You started it," she teased, dodging as he flicked a few drops back. For a brief moment, they were no longer burdened by the past. They were just two souls, free, smiling under the same light. Later, as dusk crept in, James lit a fire near the garden. The scent of smoke and grilled fish filled the air. "You always liked eating outside," he said. Diep nodded. "It reminds me of the old days, before everything fell apart." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Do you regret leaving?" She was silent for a while. Then she whispered, "Every single day." He looked into the fire, the flames flickering in his eyes. "When you left, I thought I'd stop caring. But it never really goes away, does it? The feeling that someone took a piece of you and never gave it back." "I didn't mean to take it," she said softly. "But I couldn't give you the love you deserved when I didn't even love myself." He turned to her, his voice low. "And now?" She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering in the firelight. "Now I know what love is. It's not about being perfect. It's about staying." Silence hung between them again, but it was different now, warmer, fuller. James reached out slowly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You've changed," he murmured. "So have you," she replied, smiling faintly. The next morning, the workers arrived early, bringing fresh lumber from the sawmill. James supervised as usual, but he noticed Diep speaking kindly to the laborers, offering them tea, helping stack the lighter planks. The men liked her instantly. "Your wife's a kind lady, boss," one of them joked. James froze slightly, then smiled. "She's not my wife." Diep turned, her cheeks flushing. The worker laughed, waving apologetically. "Ah, not yet then." Later that day, Lynn returned to discuss logistics for the upcoming shipment. She noticed Diep's presence again, this time in the kitchen preparing lunch. "You're quite the homemaker," Lynn said politely. "James must appreciate the company." "I'm just helping," Diep replied, her tone calm. Lynn leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You should be careful, Ms. Diep. Working with him isn't easy. James is kind, but he keeps his heart locked behind business." Diep smiled, though her eyes darkened slightly. "Maybe that's why I'm here, to remind him he's human." That evening, after Lynn left, James found Diep sitting on the porch, gazing at the sky. "What did she say to you?" he asked quietly. "Nothing you wouldn't expect," she replied. "That you hide behind work, that you don't let anyone close." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "She's not wrong. I built this farm so I wouldn't have to feel lost again." "And yet here you are," Diep said softly, "standing in front of someone who once made you feel everything." He looked at her, his voice rough with emotion. "You think we can just start over after all the damage?" "Not start over," she said. "Start from here, from what's left and what's still true." For a long time, neither spoke. The crickets sang, the wind carried the scent of blooming flowers, and the world seemed to pause just long enough for two broken hearts to find their rhythm again. The following days passed like a quiet dream. They worked together, building, planting, cooking, laughing. Each day seemed to mend a small part of what had been torn apart. But one afternoon, a letter arrived from James's father. He was visiting in 2 days, bringing with him potential investors for the farm's expansion. James frowned as he read the message. "He doesn't trust me to run my own business," he muttered. Diep placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Maybe he just wants to see how far you've come." "He wants to control everything," James replied bitterly, "even my life." When the day came, his father arrived, a tall, stern man with graying hair and the kind of authority that filled the room. He shook Diep's hand briefly, his expression polite but distant. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said coldly. "I thought you left my son for another man." The words struck like knives. Diep lowered her gaze. "That's true," she said softly, "but I also came back to apologize." James stepped between them, his voice firm. "She doesn't owe anyone an explanation. Not even you." His father's eyes narrowed. "You've changed, James." "Maybe," he said, meeting his gaze steadily. "Maybe I finally learned what matters." The meeting with the investors went smoothly, but after they left, tension still hung in the air. That night, as rain began to fall again, James's father approached him quietly. "I see why she came back," he said. "She's not the same girl she used to be." James looked at him in surprise. "You approve?" His father smiled faintly. "I don't have to approve. I just hope you don't lose her again." Later that night, James found Diep in the garden, tending to the plants despite the drizzle. He walked up behind her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "My father thinks you've changed." "Have I?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said, "and so have I." The rain softened to a mist, and in that fragile silence, James took her hand. "I don't want to lose you again, Diep." She turned, her eyes shining with quiet conviction. "Then don't." And beneath the whispering rain, under a sky heavy with memory and forgiveness, James kissed her, not as the man he was, but as the man he had become. The farm, the earth, the world around them seemed to breathe again. It wasn't the end of their story. It was simply the harvest of love, of loss, of everything they had sown in the dark and dared to grow in the light. The morning at James and Diep's farm was quiet and gentle. After a long night of rain, the sun rose slowly behind the misty hills, its golden light melting into the wet grass. Dewdrops clung to each blade, sparkling like tiny gems. The roosters crowed from afar, and Hockey barked playfully near the wooden fence, announcing the start of another day in the countryside. Inside the small kitchen, smoke from the clay stove curled upward, carrying with it the warm scent of steamed rice. Diep knelt by the hearth, her hands steady and practiced as she tended the fire. Life here had taught her to be patient. Every small effort, every flicker of flame mattered. James stepped out of his room, sleeves rolled up, his hair still damp from washing. For a moment, he stood there silently, watching her. She was wearing a plain blue dress, her hair loosely tied back, a few strands escaping and catching the morning light. It was such a simple image, yet it touched something deep inside him. "You wake up so early," James said softly. "I'm used to it," Diep smiled without looking up. "If you wake up late here, you'll lose half the morning." He chuckled. "City people like me could learn something from you." She finally turned around, eyes meeting his. In the gentle light, her gaze was calm but filled with warmth, like a quiet stream that could wash away every storm in his heart. For a second, James forgot everything else. The company, the investors, the contracts, all seemed meaningless compared to the peace he found in that look. He moved closer, taking a seat on the small wooden bench beside her. "What are you making?" "Sweet potatoes," she replied. "They'll be ready soon. Simple, but healthy." "Anything you cook is good," he said, half joking, but half true. Diep laughed softly. "You're just saying that because you're hungry." James smiled, but didn't answer. He was hungry, yes, but it wasn't for food. It was the quiet craving for the feeling of home, something he had lost long ago and somehow found again in this small, smoke-filled kitchen. Outside, the farm began to stir. Workers started arriving, the sound of their footsteps mixing with the rustle of the wind through the bamboo fence. Hacky ran in circles, chasing butterflies, and the air smelled of wet earth and growing things. After breakfast, James and Diep walked through the field together. The soil was soft after the rain, and their footprints left faint marks along the path. Rows of young corn sprouted under the morning sun, and Diep pointed at them proudly. "Look, they're growing faster than last week." "You did a great job," James said. "You really have a gift for this," she shook her head. "I just follow nature. Plants grow when they feel cared for, just like people." James turned to her. "You think people are like plants?" Diep nodded. "Yes. If you give them warmth, they'll bloom. If you ignore them, they'll wither." He was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "I guess I've let a lot of things wither in my life." She stopped and looked at him, sensing something deeper behind his words. "You've done enough, James. You just need to stop blaming yourself." He smiled faintly but didn't respond. In truth, guilt had always followed him. The weight of choices made for business, the people he hurt along the way. Yet somehow, in Diep's presence, that heaviness began to fade. As the day went on, they worked side by side, fixing the fence, watering the plants, collecting vegetables for lunch. There was no need for many words. The wind, the rustle of leaves, and their quiet rhythm said more than any conversation could. At noon, they sat under the old mango tree sharing a simple meal, rice, vegetables, and a few slices of dried fish. The breeze carried the scent of ripe fruit, and Hockey lay nearby, wagging his tail lazily. "Do you ever miss the city?" Diep asked suddenly. James thought for a moment. "Sometimes, but when I'm there, I miss this place more." "Why?" "Because this is where I feel alive," he said. Her eyes softened. "You always say things that make people believe in you," he chuckled. "I only say the truth." For a while they sat quietly. Then James took a deep breath. "Diep, I've been thinking about what you said before, that you're not worthy of me." She looked startled but said nothing. He continued, "You're wrong. You're the strongest, most genuine person I've ever known. You've taught me what love means, not with words, but with how you live every day." Her hands trembled slightly. "James, please," he interrupted gently. "You once told me love isn't about owning someone. It's about standing beside them, even when the world doesn't understand. I want to stand beside you." Tears filled Diep's eyes, glistening like morning dew. She turned away, afraid to meet his gaze. "You don't know what you're saying. People will judge you for being with someone like me." "Let them," James said simply. "They don't know what I see when I look at you." There was silence, heavy, fragile, and full of unsaid words. Finally, Diep whispered, "I'm scared, James. I've lost everything once. I don't want to lose again." He reached out, gently brushing away a tear from her cheek. "Then don't run. Let's face it together." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, painting soft patterns on the ground. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of a tractor echoed faintly, life continuing, steady and unstoppable. That evening, as the sky turned orange, Diep stood by the garden, watching the horizon. James approached quietly, holding 2 cups of warm tea. He handed her one. "Do you remember the first time we met here?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "How could I forget? You almost broke my fence." He laughed. "I was trying to help." "Help?" she teased. "You made more work for me." They both laughed, a soft, genuine laughter that melted away the last of the distance between them. James grew serious again. "I don't know what the future holds, Diep, but I know I want you in mine." She looked at him, eyes shining in the fading light. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he said firmly, "more than anything." She didn't reply right away. Instead, she leaned her head on his shoulder, her heart finally finding its rhythm again. Calm, steady, and full of hope. The night came slowly, wrapping the farm in silver moonlight. The sound of crickets filled the air, and the world seemed at peace. Inside the small wooden house, two silhouettes sat side by the window. No words, just the quiet certainty of two souls who had found their way back to each other. James looked at Diep and whispered, "You were right. Love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real." She smiled softly, "And ours is real." Outside, Hockey barked happily as the wind carried the scent of blooming flowers through the fields. For the first time in a long while, James and Diep both believed in love, in forgiveness, and in the simple, beautiful possibility of beginning again.